Well, y'all, the Tylers were putting up an article about grapes. And I do have a grape plant that needs planting so that it can do nice and good and grow well for me because, again, like all up in here, all over my property, I've got wild grapevines. So if I can just get this bad boy to grow real well and put lots of offshoots out for me, what I'm going to be able to do, maybe even this following spring, is take cuttings and just like splice this commercial Concord grapevine into a bunch of my wild grapevines. And then my neighbors down the way also have a lot of wild grapes. So I'll be able to give them cuttings and kind of do some little splicing stuff on their vines too if they want. Anyways, it's so cute how all these little plantain flowers, these are the narrow leaf, they have like these little halo crowns on them. They're so cute and the bees love them. So again, you know, I haven't actually mowed any of this space since I got back a month ago. And it's been dry, so it hasn't been growing too crazy up through here. This grass back in here does get much taller than the front yard though. So I'm just gonna show you where I'm gonna put this fencing that I'm about to cut. So again, these are all ash trees. And here in the Rifle River region of Michigan, we have an infestation of what is called emerald ash borer. And it will kill all the ash trees. And then they will just keep resprouting and dying. So it can still be a useful source of firewood that we are not allowed to sell like outside of the area. And then also just like poles and things like that. So I do have a row of ash over here too. And I had thought about putting my vine over there. But again, that is more of a like a wildlife channel. So if I were to put that up there, I would actually want to put the fencing all the way up above deer head height. And I don't really feel like doing that right now. In this area, I have a little bit more clear anyways. So, you know, the other thing is that I could go through and like tie little plastic shopping bags to the fencing so that the deer don't run into the fence. But, you know, when they're running around at night, sometimes they don't see things. They just crash into all sorts of stuff. You know, that's why they have that orange high visibility fencing. And like, I kind of learned that the hard way because even with my pawpaw cages and stuff, they just run over things. So anyways, there's this like old rotting couch frame back there that somebody dumped a long time before I ever bought this place anyways. And these two trees right here are gonna be my little fence trees. And I'm just gonna trim off some of this stuff, and I'm just gonna stick the fencing onto some branch nubs and then eventually tie it around. And then there's a brush pile over through here that I don't know, I might have even been the one that made that brush pile. I've been making all sorts of brush piles, but it's a little bit of a pain. I'm not going to actually clean up the brush pile. This area does have a divot that collects water and has standing water in it for certain times of the year. So I am not going to actually put my grapevine all the way into the ground. I'm going to do the mounding situation again. And I'm not going to pull out all of these weeds. I'm going to just mound it up in here. I'll do it on the north side of the fencing so that it'll reach the other way for the sun. Probably right up in here. And then I'll just take one of these things once I get the fencing up, some big stick, and stick it up to the fencing because I'm going to have the fencing up a little high. Because it's also going to give me privacy in this area from the road once the grapevine populates it. So it'll be really nice. I'm excited to have grapes. You know, I've bought grapes in the past. I didn't do it right. And so I know that I absolutely have got to like weed clot this thing. I'm going to go grab one of those little cages as well. And maybe even make a little hardwire, I'm saying it wrong. Hardware cloth is what it's called. That's the phrase I'm looking for. But I might build one of those little mini cages like what I do around my fruit tree trunks and then put that around the base of the grapevine because again, there's all these different critters that'll come gnaw off the bark and stuff in the wintertime. They get so hungry. And then your plant's dead. So you don't gotta just protect from the big critters, you gotta protect from the little hungry critters too. So anyways, this is gonna be my future grapevine home. We'll see how it goes. Well, I went up and got some things to get going on this. So here again is my Concord Grape. And I'm pretty sure this is the same kind that I had growing up, that the store, the nursery, sold my dad this kind of grape, even though he thought he was buying a seedless grape, because that's what it was labeled as, wrongfully. But just 3 of those just ended up growing all along our suburban yard, along the metal fence, and just covered it. And then one year when I was a young teenager, I was able to harvest them and make this amazing, amazing grape jelly. And guys, let me tell you, the way they tell you to make grape jelly is all wrong. Because they tell you to do things like to boil the grapes first. And what that does is it basically dilutes them. It like dilutes the flavor. And I wasn't good at following instructions and just like went with it, just did my thing, and I juiced the grapes just fresh. And then you're boiling that with the sugar and everything, so it is still getting cooked. But it made super amazing grape jelly, so I'm excited. But I've got that, and I've got myself a Mad Dog Skullcap, because I think I'm going to go ahead and put one of those down here, because I think it'll like it, but we'll see. Because it does get dry up here in the summer, but then, there's parts of the year where it's very moist down in this little divotty area, because you can't really tell, but it is a very gentle sloping incline here that kind of terminates here and then slopes back up the hill. And so again, the water, I have a little bit of water that'll run across up there, and then I've got this this ditch over here that I put in, because even though it's a tiled field, because it has these different slopes, all the water just channels across not just this field, but I think maybe even the other one. It comes right through here, and it would puddle right here, and then it would wash out this entire part of my land in a really heavy storm. So what I did, and I need to work on this ditch some more, but I just got out here with my shovel, and I decided no more. So over there, I have to dig this thing deeper to actually be able to get my lawnmower over, but there's one of the tube things that I showed you up by the barn in the other video. That, by the way, has been trying to upload for 2 hours, and the original load time of 3 hours is kiboshed, and it's at about 30%. They've been turning off my internet sometimes while I'm in the house and not looking. They've just been turning it off to keep my videos from uploading. And then sometimes they do things like make it so that my work website, my slave labor website, is the only one sometimes that works on my internet, guys. They'll turn off Google, everything. They weren't even gonna let me look up how grapes do in wet soil. And then somebody else, see, because then one of my people will notice again what's going on, and then one of my people will turn my internet back on. But anyways, I got this divot going all the way through here until it flattens out. It's like so vegetated you can't tell, but one day, this whole divot in my habitat zone, one day I want to have just entirely like populated by, well, not entirely populated by elderberries, but quite a bit. Because I do actually like being able to look across my property, so I don't want the back hill being completely covered by stuff, but like over on this part of it, I will populate it with elderberries. And that's part of the reason why I like putting the grapes here, is because it's not going to mess up my sunrises and things like that, and my views of when autumn comes, and those trees back there across the 2 fields are just beautiful. Anyways, I'm kind of rambling again, but I picked up out of the barn one of these cages that I showed you in my other video. And I just make these out of the fencing, and again, I add these little hooks to them so I can take them apart and put them back together pretty easy. And I reuse these instead of buying like tomato cages, because it's not just to dissuade things like deer from munching on things. Like I did just put a few of these up around my bell peppers, some shorter ones, but it's also to keep my chickens, when I have bigger chickens and things, from scratching all up along certain plants. So it's kind of like chicken protection in a way. But the deer will trample these, so aside from bringing out a couple plastic bags to just put up at, like, you know, closer to eye level for the deer, you know, it doesn't look good, but it was free, and it's just me saying, hello deer, please don't walk through this because there's something here. So go around. I don't think I finished my thought earlier, but that couch, that old couch frame and some brush pilage does keep a lot of the deer from coming through here as often, but I could still see some faint deer trailing, and I think that a couple meander in through here more so during the winter and early springtime. So I don't want to forget to mark this later, and I might actually put up more of these bags when it gets closer to winter time, because they'll just come crashing right into this thing. And they'll hurt themselves maybe, and maybe rip this down, all sorts of stuff. So it's better to just let the deer know where they shouldn't be, because they're very habitual creatures. So anyways, that's going to be my spot. Grapes super don't like wet feet, because I was trying to figure out whether I could put half of my root ball into the ground, and it seems like that's not going to be a good thing, because even though it's dry for this part of the season, you know, early on it does get quite moist down here. I don't have enough dirt, like better dirt from like other stuff, so I'm just going to be stealing from this little moundage from my till and building a mound here, and then we'll see how it goes. You know, just before I forget, when I was moving just a little bit of brush and like throwing some over there, well, first of all, those poles I might bring up to clean up to see if I need to use them for some beans or something. But I found this farm implement just laying over here, and I've had these laying around my property. Like there's one in the woods that I can't quite move yet that is larger, and man, even though it's missing the part that helps control the depth, I just wish I had something to drag this thing around with, but I don't know if my old mower can handle this sort of thing. And then I also found this fork that had been hit by the tiller in the field, because I still have to pick up all sorts of trash out of this field. Because, you know, they used to not have trash service here, and stuff used to just get thrown in piles and buried and strewn about, and then some of the fill that was used, you know, had like trash in it. I don't know. But yeah, I just found this fork, and so one of these days, I'm going to give this fork to somebody. I feel like it's very symbolic of the past handful of years, that fork. It's just very fitting. So anyways, back to work. Well, now, some of you all might have noticed that I brought out a stapler with me earlier, and so all I did is I cut out a hole, and instead of doing my little X thing and tucking it under, I just actually cut out the weed cloth, because what I'm going to do is, instead of doing the hardware wire cage over here, because frankly, I don't know, I don't feel like it. It's like, it's a pain in the butt, and then when you got something bendy like this, it's more difficult for the hardware wire cage. So all I'm going to do, and I can't do this with both hands, is I might just, I don't know, like this little viney thing, I'm not going to pop off, but I'm going to see how much of this I can just staple around the base of that, and then it's going to have some overlap, and I'm going to have to cut it a little bit, but it's just going to be mild little mouseskin rodent stem protection is what it's going to be, and it is breathable weed cloth. Like if you ever see the tree tubes around the fruit trees when you go to the nursery, it's going to basically be like that, except just used from a scrap of weed cloth. And the staples will eventually rust. It's not going to last forever, but I need that to thicken up and harden. So now I did pop off a couple of the leaves in there, but I left this little other runner is going to be coming out. And then, you know, obviously I got to finish building my mound and everything. But those rodents are just real pesky, and they can get in through tiny little gaps. And so what I'm going to have to make sure I do is make sure I get the ground all the way up to this, and then I'm going to put some dirt over it. And then I've got a couple old bags of mulch that are a few years old that were over by my old perennial bed. One of them I ran over with the mower, but I'm going to bring some of that over. And then so basically this is going to get the cage, it's going to get a bigger mound of dirt, and I'm debating on whether or not I'm going to put a trash bag around the cage to also keep that from getting, I don't know, this might be good enough. So, anyways. Well, so this is just kind of where things are at right now. I was able to make it this far without using my shovel because I was just scooping up some dirt in the bucket there. And I did pay $15 for this grape, and we'll see how it ends up going. My mound, I built up a little bit more. Now, this cage, I did try to pick the tallest cage that there was, because I think that this is going to end up being a semi-permanent thing. And so I did have to go get my snips, and well, I probably didn't need to cut 2 rows, but I went ahead and cut both rows. So, you know, this thing might move back and forth. I'm going to debate whether or not I'm going to get a stake sometime for this center part of this fencing. You know, right now, if I would have been putting up 20 foot of fencing, which, you know, the tag on this does say 15 to 20 feet of spacing. So just from even childhood experience, I know it's going to be able to fill up this whole length real nice to a point where I'm going to be able to eventually expand it down the tree line. But I got a whole lot of things I need this fencing for right now that really got left, and I'm going to have to end up getting some more later. But, you know, nothing comes free anymore at all. It's just getting more expensive. But, you know, usually if you wanted really good solid stakes for this much fencing, it would cost you like a, you know, decent amount of money for the good stuff. And I've got it rigged up on these nubs that I cut off. So, like, this one has got 3 nubs coming through it, the fencing, so that even if one ever ends up breaking off or something, it'll get caught up on another one. Like, this lower one is actually the one it's most caught up on right now. But eventually I might go ahead and stick 1 nail through here. You know, I don't necessarily like putting nails in, because if you ever run a chainsaw through it later, it's not good for your chain. But these, I think I'm just gonna let live, basically, and it will have to get topped eventually. I mean, you can already see it's dying from the emerald ash borer. They'll just like sometimes descend. They're these brilliant green beetle bugs that eat these. So eventually the dead parts, after a long enough time, will like break off and stuff. But yeah, I might just leave it the way it is. I may or may not add a stake in the middle eventually. It's not high on the priority list. And then I've got it on 2 nubs over here that I just snipped off. It's kind of like on a 3rd point, and well, this is just that chain I dug up with my tiller that I stuck over the branch, but I'm just gonna maybe leave it there. And then I got that nub. And this thing, you know, it'll keep putting off sprouts, so I gotta decide whether or not to clean it up. But, you know, I thought I might just leave this one, and it'll help hold this against the tree somewhat without me having to drive a nail in through there. Though, you know, since these are gonna be sticking around, a couple of nails wouldn't be so bad. And I know I'm kind of carrying on, but, you know, I decided to actually swap out my Mad Dog Skullcap that I had picked out for a bigger one, because instead of cutting a hole in this weed cloth like over here, which is what I had been planning on doing, since it sends out all these little runners that put down roots, and I do want to have access to like dirt and not just mulch, I'm just going to basically, you know, the weed cloth is going to be right up on here. So right up next to this weed cloth is where I'm going to pop that Mad Dog Skullcap. And when you have to cut the holes and then sink them in under the weed cloth, you know, the smaller pots, you know, go faster. But since I gotta dig this out anyways, I went and I swapped this out for a bigger pot. This used to be a boxwood, but yeah, so we'll see how it goes. Now, I just wanted to mention this landscape fabric, both of these varieties, you know, they are supposed to be porous, but they're not as porous as just dirt. So if I would have wanted to, part of the reason why I wanted to cut a big square out of this is so that when I actually go in with my watering can, it's gonna like actually soak in and not just run off the edges, because right now I've only got roots in that center part of which is covered by that thing that's covering the base. So I want plenty of water to be able to soak in under that, and then I'm going to have the mulch on top, and then eventually this is going to create a pseudo drip line off of this, which when the roots expand, that won't be like a terrible thing, you know. And it's not a big section of weed cloth, but I don't want to use up too much. I just want enough. This is the 5.8 ounce stuff, so if I cover this well, this stuff will last 20 years. or more. You know, if you actually prep everything right with this and cover it properly and in certain conditions, some of this stuff can last 40 years. So it's more expensive, but you know, it's supposed to be quite good. It's felted. So it isn't just the woven landscape fabric, but it's also felted. So anyways, I'm gonna keep cracking at it. Well, before I cover this root ball with dirt, because I've just been like pillaging little bits from the field here and there, I just wanted to show you how this Mad Dog Skullcap works and the reason why I did not want to actually put it under the weed cloth. Because I would have been okay with it as like an individual specimen, but you know, if I can get this to turn into 10 plants that I can cut off because they're rooted, then all the better. So this little plant will put out all these little runners, and they're beneath the surface. Okay. So because of this weed cloth, they wouldn't have anywhere to poke up. Once they're ready to poke up, I don't know how, because these aren't just roots, they're gonna like grow into branches, and it's just gonna clump and spread all over the place. So I wanted to have at least one side here that is gonna give it a little bit of weed control. But even these are more manageable and don't create as thick of a root mat as the crazy tall grasses that I have, and they pull out pretty easy, and these put out flowers that the butterflies love, even though they're kind of this weedy thing. But anyways, that's the Mad Dog Skullcap, and it does, I think, tend to prefer kind of like moister areas. So if I were to put some where the water table is a little lower, it might do even better. But again, this area will be pretty moist for a decent part of the year. So anyways, I'm gonna keep cracking because I'm getting real close to being done with this. Oh, you know, I don't because this is like a 20-year sort of weed cloth situation. You know, if I put spikes in here, like the little landscape staples, they're just gonna rust away, and it's just gonna be a waste. So I mostly got those for the area that I'm not covering with mulch or anything, because to cover that much square footage with mulch would be just prohibitively expensive for me right now. So I don't want it to fly away, and it doesn't have anything weighing it down up there. But here, since I'm mulching this, you know, I just took a root clump up there, but I'm just gonna mulch over this and then kind of bring that vine up a little bit. So guys, again, these 2 bags of mulch that I brought up were the ones by that overgrown perennial bed that have been sitting in the hot sun in the bags for 2 or 3 years now. And so I just dumped out that bag, and I want to show you whose home I disrupted here. So this little guy, he crawled out of the mulch because I had run over that other one with the mower, and there's just big holes in it. So not only have these snakes, now I've got them yellow striped ones too, been going through all my hay bales and hunting mice and things like that, but they also apparently been up in here. Okay, and what is this? I don't even know what this is. Well, anyways, this guy has had some big roots. There's even still some big roots under in here that were growing up through the bag, but I almost dumped this bag, opened this bag and dumped it on him, and he's just staring at me. And it's funny because this happens a lot. I've been gone for a while, and even when I first moved here, the place had been kind of abandoned for a while, and the critters are just curious. They just like, some of them will just come stare at you. I had right after I bought this place and I was going around doing some beds, I had this yellow striped snake that was following me through the orchard, spying on me, watching me work. He was so curious. So it's just a little bit funny. He's just like, hey there, lady, what are you doing? My home is gone. Okay, and he's like, I mean, this is a kind of small one to give you perspective of size. Well, I don't know, I guess you saw how big that plant was earlier. So he's like over a foot long, but he's kind of small on the middle side, I guess. But yeah, now I gotta like be like, excuse me, buddy, but like I got work to do here. So, I don't know. I'm just gonna flick some of this on him and see, okay, I'm flicking some mulch on you, dude, like go. Don't go under there all the way. Yeah, you gotta keep on moving because I'm about to cover that. So he's just under there. Okay, so anyways, I don't know. Poor guy, but it had to happen. So since this base is gonna eventually kind of harden, I did want to get it as upright as I could while still giving it a little bit of flex space, since this does move a little bit. I decided that, I don't really want to drive a heavy post in here because, well, first of all, I don't have one right now, and I don't really feel like putting an ash pole in or anything quite like that either. So one thing that I did do to keep this cage from coming up out of the ground, because again, it only has I just basically have the bottom of this cut so that this little section sticks into the ground on the bottom there. And so it would be really vulnerable to topping over, and once my vine gets going, then it could like take my vine out with it. So what I did just do is, since I had cut this in the middle, okay, and I should have maybe even cut it at the longer end so that I wouldn't have these sharp nubs sticking out on this side, but I just, in each direction, I wrapped one around this wider fencing in each direction so that the cage isn't really going to go in either way, if that makes sense. And then I did the same thing over here, though. I suppose I could, well, I don't have my gloves on right now, but yeah, I don't want to really do that because it's a little pokey without my gloves on, but even just the one side really helps stabilize it. And again, the one thing that would really just screw me over with this, if a deer just comes crashing in, like right as it starts to get established, but isn't visible enough to the deer, if the deer comes crashing through, it could just uproot, it could just take out the whole thing. So because they do have such a tendency to crash into my cages and trample them and everything, I had already put my trash bag up and decided, well, they probably wouldn't see it down by the base anyways. So again, we're at someplace where I just know they're going to see it. It looks awful, but the whole point is to make sure that this thing can get established without just being stampeded by some deer that's just kind of galloping along slowly, I mean, through here they probably go a little bit slower, but still, I just don't want them knocking this thing over. Because once it starts to populate the woody vine that'll stay up over winter and everything, it'll be all right. But just a little bit of ugliness for now, and it's gonna be okay. I gotta go put my tools away and bring the watering can out. Now, since my sprayer nozzle broke, I haven't actually done any watering at all this morning, and I do need to go soak my large clearance evergreen that I put up, for example, because those things are really hard to keep alive. So even though I'm just kind of spewing water out the end of my hose, I'm gonna go do that and use the watering can on some stuff and bring the watering can out here. And anyways, thanks for the inspiration, the motivation this morning to make sure I get this going, my precious Tylers. I love you guys. Okay, so if you guys ever want some of my grape jelly later, you let me know. I'm going to be able to eventually multiply this. It's a $15 investment in just the vine. And then you got to really kind of take care of some other things to get it going, right? And that's kind of where I missed out before, where I've bought some, because the Tractor Supply would sell grapes for like $5 in the spring and stuff. And I never really did it the right way. I was cutting corners and then telling myself I would get it done right later. And I would just get so caught up in stuff. Okay, so we'll see how this goes. I'm excited. I'm really hoping that 2 years from now I'm going to be able to have that populated a whole lot of my wild grapes, because they end up covering my trees and everything. And basically the vine, the mother vine of the wild grapes, I can cut it down and just leave a little bit above ground and then splice cuttings of this in at the right time of year and they might need to get taped with that special tape, and I've never done it before, so it'll be my first time doing that when I try to get that done in the spring. But I'm hoping I can get at least maybe 4 of those done next year. And these aren't, the kind of sumptuous little table grapes that are seedless that I like every once in a while, but these are going to be great for preserving and for vinegars and things like that. And if you look at it from like a stable food source kind of thing, if I had my big solar dehydrator up and running and built, which I do not, sure, I could dehydrate like the really nice seedless table grapes and make raisins and things like that. But the thing is that these grapes are just I feel like they're a little bit more nutritionally dense, and they're just gonna make a really great, like vinegar, for example. So not even just jelly, but like if I don't want to be mixing in a whole lot of sugar and having like that kind of processed stuff, I can make big things of vinegar just in the big food grade buckets and then age it. And then let's say I eventually get my farmstead going to a place where I have enough product that I can sustain like a farmer's market presence. That vinegar I can sell all year round. And again, for the home kitchen type of products, it's like a $25,000 a year sales cap. So if you're doing that and you're having to buy all your grapes, because they don't care. Like if you spent half of that $25,000 on products to add value to, it doesn't matter, because it's not like your net. It's not $25,000 net. It's just your overall sales. So if you're taking products from your own property, it works out much better. So if I can get to a point where I'm doing a lot of that, and even like jams and things like that, and like dried mushrooms and dried fruits, once I get a huge solar dehydrator built, which those things are fascinating, the ones that I like, because they don't actually use just the heat so much, is that the sun, it creates a big air suction flow, and it's just this massive airflow through the solar dehydrator. That's what is actually drying out the fruit and stuff. But once I get apricots going and my plum starts producing, I just really want to be drying a lot of that stuff instead of having to depend on just having tons of sealed mason cans. Because, that dried fruit, you can just put it in a washed out old spaghetti jar. So I don't know. I think eventually once I get my nursery thing going, I'm going to ask the nursery guy what are the standards for pots. Because what I might start doing is I might put up a sign in like a Craigslist post, and I might start buying people's bottles and old pots and like spaghetti jars and things off of them, so that it'll kind of create a little bit of an economy where I can give them more than what they'll get for recycling. Like even their soda pop bottles, I can cut off the top of that and drill a hole in it, and I got a pot for a plant. And I'm recycling and I'm saving money, because pots get expensive and someone else is making a little money, so we'll see. And I'm doing that whole rambling thing again where I just have way too many things running through my head. But anyways, I gotta go water. I'm super stoked. I feel like, I've tried to do grapes before. I put them in areas where they just get super overrun, and I would put them in at times where I didn't actually have the weed cloth on hand, and so I'd be like, oh, well, I'm gonna weed cloth that later and mulch it later. And it just wouldn't happen, because I go into modes where I become extremely miserly, and like I don't spend money on nothing. So that's like part of why I am having fun loading some of my purchases on like basically all the upgrades to my home and stuff that I've committed to making this year, even if I don't actually get around to installing them until winter, because I know what's going to happen is I'm going to go into just that monetary lockdown mode where I'm not spending anything, and then it's going to take me like another 4 years to replace that toilet in the half bathroom downstairs, for example. So now I already have the toilet, and it's going to go in eventually, and I don't know, it'll be all right. Anyways, y'all, sometimes I get up on people about getting back on top of their PT and things like that, and that kind of thing matters. But if any of y'all are in a place where you can just plant something and watch it grow for a little while, even if it's not a permanent location, maybe try that out. People can get to the place where they have gardens. I think one of the great joys in life, like especially if you have like young children, okay, is for them to be able to just go out into the garden and like pick a grape. Just go out to the yard, pick a grape, and pop it in their mouth. Or like to go out in the garden and pop a snow pea off the vine and just stick it into their mouth and eat it. I think, especially for young kids, it's like one of those things that it has value to all of us, but we get to choose kind of the things that we want our kids to learn and what values we want them to have. And I know, a lot of my teammates have new babies, and congratulations. And I know it's a tough life, and we're trying to do some things that are not easy, and just let's not lose sight of the things that matter in the meantime. I love you guys. Take it easy. Well, shoot, guys, I did the thing again, because I just didn't want to you know, again, I don't ever encourage people to do things the way I do things, because frankly, I do things, you know, wrong, I guess, all the time. But I was just realizing when I was putting my first watering can down here that I left this top open all the way across, this Y top, and them little rodents can just climb right up over this felted stuff and right down in there and gnaw off the trunk of my grapevine. Okay? And if they can, the odds that they will certainly exist, because these things, you don't want to underestimate them. So before I'm gonna put another watering can full, another thing it's seen better days. I don't know if you can see the water bubbling out of there, but it's all good. It's getting the job done good enough. But I brought my stapler back out, and I'm just gonna staple the top of that, and I am gonna pinch. There is like a leaf further in there from the smaller vine that I'm gonna go ahead and pinch off, and I'm just gonna kind of staple around that small little vine and the big vine and leave a little space. And then as it grows, I can bust a couple of them staples out and take that felt off, even if I feel like it. But, you know, don't necessarily do things the way I do things, but, you know, if you do ever do this with your landscape fabric scrap and you're using the staples, definitely do the top so they don't just crawl up in there. Okay, so for reals, take it easy this time. I got to go to the store and get myself a sprayer and get myself some bottled water, because, you know, in this kind of like absurd world with some of the things that I've been up to, I can't even go just to the local stores for bottled water regularly without putting my community in danger. So I have to go out just for bottled water, and there has been some spraying and stuff going on. So even though I got the filters, I'm just gonna go ahead and drink bottled water for a little while, just in case my water table is not doing so great right now. But anyways, take it easy, you guys.